So I got the little record button up top, so I think
Okay,
we're good.
We're good to go.
Yep.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Thanks, Austin. Cool. All right. Well, glad this all worked out. It wouldn't be a good podcast if there wasn't, something that came up. But so
yeah, of course, the obstacle is the way, man.
Right. Exactly. So, well, thanks, Kyle, for being on. We're gonna cover. I'll just kind of go through what we're gonna cover. We're going to talk about the MFC championship, obviously, that you're going to be competing in. We're excited about that.
For sure.
But we want to talk about you as an athlete, past and present, because now you're, into the master scene, right?
Yep.
Your coaching background, and I understand you're a husband and father, which I think is also really cool.
Absolutely.
And then we definitely want to get your thoughts on the current state of affairs in CrossFit as it relates to your athletes and now as it relates to you as an athlete. So
for sure.
That sounds.
I think this sounds like an exciting podcast to me.
Yeah. So, well, cool. Let's start off with you and I chat a little bit, but like where you're from and, kind of like your athletic background.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm originally from Indiana. So when I saw the Masters Fitness Championships coming up in Fort Wayne, I was like, man, it's just like right, it's in my backyard. So I'm originally from Yorktown, Indiana, small town. You being from Indiana, where it is, but anybody listening to this podcast that's outside will have no idea.
Yeah, right.
I grew up swimming. So at about 9, I started swimming competitively. I still kept a foot in some other sports, some martial arts, some running. I ran cross country and track all the way up until my freshman year in high school. But at that point, I'd had a lot of success swimming. So I decided I was just going to go full force.
What were your events?
50 freestyle, 100 butterfly were my two primary. I was a decent 100 breaststroker by the end of my swimming career, which spanned until I was 26. So,
wow.
Yeah, I kept swimming basically forever. I had this.
You started when you were 9, is what you said?
Yeah. I started when I was 9. I took 2 breaks. I took a break when I was 19 for about a year, did a lot of trail running and lifting and kind of to fitness. And then I decided to come back, 3 or 4 months of coming back at it. And I swam really fast, matching my previous best times. And I did a lot of that self-coached. So I swam for Indiana University for 2 years. And then at that point, I quit. I just had some disagreements with the coach. And in hindsight, I was just being a hard-headed 19-year-old. I've realized that 99% of that was my own just stupid youth mistakes. Yeah. But so I started swimming again competitively, but I did it on my own. I was training in the diving well. And I was swam short events. So I was like, man, just like, I'm not going to have to spend that much time training. I'm going to have to spend more time in the weight room and doing things like that. So I really started exploring things like plyometrics, explosive strength training, things like that. Cause I'd always liked the weight room.
And what were you studying in college?
So, undergrad, I did exercise physiology. And then when I finished my undergrad, I knew that there was a lot more to be explored. Like I felt like I had only scratched the surface on what there was to really understand about the human body and human performance. And to be honest, I was obsessed, still am, with human performance. It was just the thing that drove me. Yeah. So I decided to continue and do a master's. So I decided to do a master's at IU because they had the Councilman Center for Swimming Science. It was something that was unique and didn't really exist anywhere else in the world. And it was really cool. I mean, I had an opportunity to really focus on performance. And while swimming was the primary focus, my primary focus actually started to drift towards what swimmers would call dry land and what the rest of us would just call strength and conditioning. Right. And I was super interested in how to learn from other sports, how we could take some of the principles they were using to train track sprinters to train swimming sprinters, how we could take the elements of, prepping an NFL athlete for the combine and how we might take some of those elements and improve swimming performance. So part of that was like an analysis. I really started to break down okay, let's take an athlete and let's run them through a full assessment. So let's figure out their start time to 15 meters. Let's figure out their flag to flag turn time, their free speed time, so that was sort of the first introduction I had to individualized coaching and training. And there weren't many people at that time doing that. In fact, there may not have been anybody doing that in the swimming world back in 2009, 2010.
Yeah.
And it just played so well into my transition into CrossFit in 2011. Like, I finally reached what I had considered to be the pinnacle of my swimming career. I'd finished my master's, I'd moved on, and I was coaching full time swimming. And I was working with some pretty high level performers at that time in swimming. And I got into CrossFit for my own training.
So talk about, like, I've got kids in swimming, right? Like, so my 10-year-old just had her last swim meet yesterday. And I did not swim growing up. I grew up in where Frankie lives in Ohio, and you could play football, baseball, basketball,
wrestling.
And wrestling. My high school didn't have wrestling. So, you know, swimming, you swim at the pool, but it was more like Sandlot. Like, so if you got too hot, you went to the pool to cool off, and you went back and played baseball.
Yeah, for sure.
For those who don't know, swimming's like a full-time commitment. Like, my kids have been swimming since they were 5. So that's why I said you start when you're 9. So you probably were able to not get burnt out as long.
I was considered a late starter for sure, starting at 9.
But talk about, like, the commitment, just that, like, if you want to be competitive between 9 and 13, like, what's that commitment look like as a kid?
Yeah. So as a kid, as a 9-year-old, so it started pretty light for me. I started on the summer club team.
Yeah.
I was just, I don't know if it's a genetic thing or what, but I was always blessed with this, like, really good upper body pulling endurance and strength. Like, I could rip off.
Are you tall by CrossFit standards?
No. Well, by CrossFit standards, yes. I'm 5'11".
Oh, you're huge. Yeah.
So I'm way taller than the world champions, right?
Yeah.
But from a swimming perspective, I was like the shortest
Pretty
dude
short,
on my college team, right? Maybe one guy shorter than me. But I had a wingspan of 6'3" at 5'11". So you can imagine there's like a huge disconnect. I had a 4-inch disconnect between wingspan and my height. So even young, like, I had some success. And by the next year, I was training 5 days a week. And when I say training, I mean, as a 10-year-old, I was in the pool for 90 minutes, 5 days a week.
Yeah.
Right. That's pretty intense. And when you're at a swim practice, anyone who's ever been to one, or if you haven't been to one, you pretty much get in the water. At least when I was coming up, I was coached by Pam Swanner, who's now like sort of a legendary college swim coach. But that was like who my age group coach was when I started. And it was basically, you get in the water and you just go for 90 minutes. Like, there's some intervals and some breaks and stuff, but you didn't get out of the water to go to the bathroom. It was just
that's how it is now. I mean, it's intense. And I made the mistake of volunteering for my kid's first, like, big meet.
Yeah.
And I told my wife, I'm sure we'll be home for lunch. And we got there like 7 a.m. No, I was there till like 5 at night.
It's all day. It's all day.
Crazy.
Yeah, man. My parents carted me all over the place.
Yeah.
To swim. I mean, we ended up, like, most of our spring breaks were spent traveling to meets and things like that. But, like, in what high level performance sport are you not making massive sacrifices like that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Agree.
Like,
yeah. I mean, and you can't, and listen, my 10-year-old, this is probably her last year swimming. Look, she's just, like, she's really short, and she's like super into CrossFit right now, right? So, like, that's all she wants to do is train, and she wants to swim because she wants to be good at it, but she knows she's not gonna be the best at that, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm like, it's fine. Like, you've got this skill, you've been doing it for 5 years, you're never gonna forget how to swim now, and that's always been my goal. And if one of my kids, I have 4 of them, if one of them's like, I want to be a competitive swimmer, then I'll help support them. But you're right. The commitment for anything right now, baseball, football, basketball,
it's all intense.
Yeah. It's a bit much. Like, I grew up playing every sport you could, possibly play. I played football and ran track in college, and I played football professionally a little bit. And I still think variation is the key, like, trying to do multiple sports.
I totally agree with you. So if we look at it, like, the sporting world for kids has really gone to, like, commit early. Like, everyone just specialize and go into your thing. And I look at my daughter, and she, like, the only organized sport that she's been involved in has been gymnastics. But we play basketball together. You know what I mean? Like, yesterday we rode our bike 5.5 miles to go pick
how
up
old
a
are your
dog.
kids?
So I have a 7, almost 8-year-old and a 3-year-old. And,
Okay, cool.
and my older daughter is like just into CrossFit, like you said. And I almost feel like CrossFit now for kids is the variance that we had growing up of playing
100%.
soccer and then basketball and then baseball and, riding your BMX bike and hitting jumps and stuff like that. Like that was what we did as kids. And now CrossFit for kids can almost be like the replacement for that. So, and by the way, it's so cool that your daughter's into CrossFit, mine too. And it is just awesome to watch them learning the skills.
Yeah.
Dude, I wish I had her front rack mobility and her like front squat mobility. I'm like,
Me too.
God. Oh man.
So my kid, Bella, my oldest, decides she wants to do weightlifting because CrossFit's too hard. This is like 6 months ago. Okay.
Yeah.
So she does, weightlifting. We have an Olympic lifting coach at my gym that I own. And he's like, she's really good. So we go to a meet. She just misses like qualifying for nationals by like 2 pounds or something like that. So gets excited now. Then she qualified. So then she qualifies. And I'm like, look, like if you want to be really good at lifting, you need to start doing CrossFit, get in better shape, and not just be one of these people that lifts heavy weights. So now she's like all in. So we train together every day. The other day, I had a really small window and I had to train, right? So she's like, Dad, just save like a little piece for me and we'll do it later. Well, I did the whole thing, right? So I come up, I'm like, I had to take her to something, like a dentist appointment. And I'm like, I did all the training, and immediately she like turns into my wife, like won't talk to me, like walks away. I said, are you mad at me? And she's like, yes. I said, why? She's like, you didn't wait for me to train. I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to deal with this now with my 10-year-old. But no, but it's cool. And I have an 8-year-old, and she's really cool too. But as they get to like 10, man, they're like she's like my best friend right now, especially during quarantine. So.
Yeah, she's getting like my daughter's getting hungry for fitness, and it's been awesome to watch the transformation.
Yeah, it's cool, man. I'm glad we share that. So let's go back a little bit. So you stumble into CrossFit in 2011. What was your first CrossFit experience? Was it in Bloomington?
My very first CrossFit experience was actually well before I actually got into CrossFit. So while I was coaching, I was the head coach of a team in Bloomington at the time. This was like circa 2009. Wow. I'd seen some kid in one of my classes gave a presentation on CrossFit. We had to give a presentation on some strength and conditioning topic. I did complex training, which is like plyometrics combined with strength training. And this guy he gave the CrossFit spiel, like broad time modal domain. This is the definition of fitness. And I was like, damn, I like this. Like, this is a really good definition of fitness, right?
Yeah.
So I went on main site, and that day's main site workout was Fran. So I did Fran with strict pull-ups. I did the first set of 21 strict pull-ups unbroken, but Fran took me 11 and a half minutes that day. And I was immediately humbled, because the way I looked at it is like, okay, I was just shy of world-class 100 butterflyer, right? Yeah. So my endurance was through the roof. I could run a 5:30 mile at the drop of a hat. You were like, go run a mile. I could run a 5:30 mile. Damn. I could back squat 450 by 3. I could bench press 355. And from a swimmer perspective, I was really strong.
Yeah, right.
Right. And I was really enduring outside of the pool. And I had this like chip on my shoulder that I was like super fit. And then I did Fran, and I looked at the times, and people were doing it back then in like, 4 minutes, 3.5 minutes.
Yeah.
And I was like, what is wrong with me? But then it planted this seed in the back. I didn't do any more CrossFit. And it was like this thing in the back of my mind that was always eating at me. Like, there's this whole element and whole area of fitness which you haven't even explored. And it was so humbling that's what kind of like pulled me into it, if that makes sense.
That's cool. That's really cool. I feel like everyone's kind of got that story. It's cool that you kind of got it that young. So, it's funny. You talk about like the plyometric training and things like that. Like, that's what I was super into. I played football, and I was obsessed with becoming explosive and fast, because in football, that's all that matters, you know? And we would joke because I liked working out. Actually loved practice and working out more than I liked the games. I just really enjoyed that. And me and my buddies would joke. Now I graduated college, or my last year playing college football was 2002. So, you know, we would joke and be like, man, imagine if working out was a sport. Because all it was back then was bodybuilding. And everybody knew, like, look, if you want to be a really good bodybuilder, you had to get, you know, jacked up on roids. And, you know, obviously having some sort of genetic position would be great. But ultimately, you know, we had some guys that quit playing football, started taking steroids. They were huge. But, like, that, I never thought that was fit. Like, I always wanted to be the guy that could do, you know, kind of multiple things. So you finally finished swimming. You swam for a really long time. And then, you know, we'll fast forward a little bit. You make regionals 4 times, which is
So I actually made regionals within 6 months of starting CrossFit.
Damn. And so
I didn't even know what the Open was. Like 3 months into it.
Where are you at this point? Are you still in Bloomington or
Charlotte, North Carolina? Well, just north of Charlotte, a little suburb of Charlotte. But I happened to run into this guy, Preston Austin, who had been a sectional champion the year prior. Okay. And he was the head coach at the gym that I was going to, and he was there the day I did my initial assessment, and I ripped up. It was like 400-meter run, 21:15.9, strict pull-up, push-up, ring row, or something like that. I ripped off 21 strict unbroken pull-ups, and he was like, "You're going to start training with me." And I was like, "Okay, cool." Yeah. And so I just started training with him. So I got the best possible introduction that you could get into the sport. I had a training partner who was also a mentor and a coach straight away. And he was a competitor, and like a very experienced competitor at that time. And then I brought in a lot of the performance engineering stuff that I'd learned from my background in swimming and the Counseling Center. And together, he and I, like, we 2012 regional, 2013 regional, 2014 regional, 2015 regional together. And I think part of it was that we just competed consistently, that we kind of supported each other all the time. That was just an awesome introduction into the sport. But yeah, I have to admit that I think a lot of the early success from 2012, 2013 was driven by just that environment that we had going on at the time.
So, you know, I looked this up. So and I don't mean to pour salt in the wound, but you missed the games by 1 point.
Yeah.
Man.
I got beat by another swimmer. I
saw Jordan Trent. Yeah. So talk about, like, obviously there's probably a lot that goes into losing by 1 point, but what was that like for you? I mean, that had to have been tough.
Well, obviously in the moment. So, like, I'm standing on, it came down to the point that, like, we couldn't do the math to figure out who was going to the CrossFit Games. Like, my team that was there, my family, the people from my gym and everything, like, they're like, we can't figure it out. We can't figure out if you're tied. And if we tied, I had 2 wins, so I was going. Yeah. And if we were not tied, if it was me up 1 or him down 1, so, like, we couldn't figure it out. So it came down to them doing the announcement. And so obviously in the moment that was a bit heartbreaking, but I just felt like I was such a young competitor. In hindsight, this is funny, but I felt like I was such a young competitor because I was only 2 years into training for the sport. But I was also, I think I was 28, maybe 27. It just depends on when the regional weekend was. But I mean, if you look at that now, like 28,
you're old.
It's like peak. It's like peak age for the sport, 28, 29, 30.
Professional CrossFitters are like NFL running backs. If you hit 30, you're expired.
Yeah, I'd say that I would have argued that was true when I was 30, but I coached Josh Miller, and that kid keeps getting better. He's 31, and he's only getting better every single year. But
if you think about how people are getting into the sport younger now, in the next decade or 2 decades, I mean, really 30 is going to be about your cap, because when you think about, and the reason running backs only last to 30, those guys are typically running backs since they were like 8. So they've been literally getting hit for, 22 years. And when you think about CrossFit, you're getting hit every day.
I totally agree. I now coach some 18 and 19-year-olds that are pushing the 24, 25, 26-year-olds. And I coach some 24, 25, 26-year-olds that are knocking on the door of the guys who are the best in the sport right now, that are in their 28 to 31 range. It's definitely the truth.
What percentage of your athletes that you train are remote and then physically there?
I coach almost entirely remote athletes. I have 2 athletes that train consistently on site at Training Think Tank. One of them is one of our coaches, Mia Gianelli, and the other is Jake Berman, who trains we have an on-site training group, sort of like an elite training group that trains together. So he does, I write his individual stuff, but he does that sort of hybrid, the group stuff on Monday, Wednesday, but sometimes Monday, Tuesday, but Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And then we do our throwdown, our big competitive thing on Saturday.
Yeah, those are cool. When you were thinking about, getting your exercise phys degree and going through and you're going to be a coach, did you ever think in a million years you'd be remote coaching a bunch of people?
I didn't even think that was a thing at the time. I didn't know that was a potential career option. But had you told me around that time that remote coaching was something that I could do full-time professionally, I'd have jumped at that, because I loved the problem-solving aspects of designing training. I loved creating elegant templates and fitting in priorities and doing those things. I love that. I have always loved, I wrote my first training program when I was 18, my first legit periodized training program when I was 18 years old. And I was doing the math the other day, and I realized that I think I've written over 15,000 training weeks at this point in my life.
Damn. And do you write your own programming?
No. So to go back, 2012, I sort of wrote my own programming. Preston and I kind of hybridized it. 2013, I kind of took over my own thing and did my own programming that year. It worked really well. But I think it was one of those situations where I was just getting better because I was still so young in the sport. It was I was getting better in spite of what I was doing, not because.
Right.
It's 30% of the training volume that I was doing was productive, and 70% was just me beating the piss out of myself.
Yeah, right. Yep.
And then I hired Max Elhag, the owner and founder of Training Think Tank, in 2013, right after regional. So you can imagine that the disappointment with missing that was one of the things that spurred. I was like, dude, if I want to be more serious about this, I need to hire an outside eye. And that was remote. So he was, at the time, he was in Salt Lake City and I was in Charlotte, North Carolina. Okay. He coached me all the way through the 2015 season, at which point we had talked about that magic number 30. I just kind of made a transition. I was like, I want to focus more on coaching, less on competing as an individual. But I'd always said that when I became a master's, I was back in.
Yeah.
And
did you just turn 35 this year? Was this your first year?
Yeah, I actually so funny. My birthday's in the perfect spot for this. So I was 34 all the way up until June.
Oh,
right?
Nice. Yeah.
So I was the young guy in the Masters division, but I'd always said that was what I was going to do. I even took the first 2019 Open off.
Yeah.
As part of my prep for this year, that's the only Open I haven't done since 2012.
Well, that didn't really count anyway, right?
I've done one every year.
Yeah, right. You still did it. That's, it's interesting. So I'm now, I'll be 30. Well, depends on when the next Open is, I guess. I would have been 39 doing this Open as a 40-year-old, but it sounds like now they're moving regional or the Open back to February, March. So I'll actually be 40. But it's weird. This is probably my best Open in the 35 to 39 division for whatever reason. But look, man, you got this great, you've been to regionals 4 times or whatever. You have a legitimate shot, try to crack that top 10. It'll be interesting, talking with Dave Castro a couple days ago. Your podcast follows Dave Castro, so no big deal, right? But it sounds like there's a lot of changes coming up. for particularly the masters next year and maybe the individuals. How do you guys deal with that at Training Think Tank? Like this last couple of years had been kind of hard to prep your athletes on the fly. Like what's that like?
Well, so I'm going to look at this from two perspectives. One, the psychological, and two, the physical. So from a psychological perspective, one of the things I really try to teach my athletes is to just to focus on the things they can control. They can't control what the season's going to look like. They can't control whether some sanctional is going to get canceled. They can't control when the qualifiers are going to come out. So focus on the things that are in your control, sort of a stoic approach to athleticism. And if you focus on the things you can control, that is your training consistency, the systems you have in place for recovery habits and nutrition and things like that. And if you do that, if you focus on the things that are within your control, you're always going to be more prepared for whatever the season throws at you than if you're constantly worried about like, oh, well, the season's now in February and my sanctionals are canceled, and stressing over those things isn't going to help you get better as an athlete. What helps you get better? The training process, systems that help you, kind of narrow your focus and narrow your life, and and then in the end, just focusing on your own controllables. So I try to approach it from that psychological perspective. Then from the physical side, I use what I call the limiter bridge performance model. It's a periodization model and training model that I created with Max and Evan, another Training Think Tank coach, that we use to train all of our guys from Noah all the way to the guys that are trying to crack the top 1,000 in the world in the open, or the masters guys who want to just crack into the top 200 for the age group qualifier. But that system essentially focuses the majority of the time on that individual's biggest limiters. So like, as an example, if you're weak with muscle ups, then we're going to be focusing on muscle up tech, or, developing muscle ups in a Metcon, or if your cardiac output is low relative to your strength metrics, then we're going to focus on building cardiac output. If your ergs are weak, then we're going to focus on developing your ergs. So you spend most of the time building your lowest hanging fruit.
What
and
if
then
you have, I've got this is more like a personal question, because like I'm the weirdo that's like just moderately good at everything. So like how would you attack that if, you look at this and say, well, Bobby doesn't really have like a glaring weakness. Like, so what's that look like for those kind of athletes?
Well, then I think what we need to do is we need to look at the season as a whole and say, all right, let's do a really objective analysis of you relative to the field. Because I think a lot of times when someone says, I'm really well-rounded, what they're really saying is, I don't have any movements necessarily that hold me back, but you might have specific time domains or weight thresholds or things like that are a big struggle.
So really, you're really digging into like, okay, like, yeah, your strength's okay, and this is okay, but this is where you need to focus because this is where you're lacking.
The other nice thing that we've got, because we are an organization that coaches a lot of really talented athletes across the spectrum, from teen to masters to individuals to team athletes, we have a massive data set to know what is required to be competitive in various aspects of the sport. And so I can look at it and someone will say, like I said, someone will say, yeah, I'm really well-rounded. But then you look at it, you're like, well, actually, your absolute strength metrics are good for the sport, but your weightlifting metrics, you have a hard time converting your absolute strength to weightlifting. So maybe we're going to focus more on strength speed, and just really starting to get down to the details that separate elites or we'll just call it good from great, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So you guys are athletic nerds.
Yeah, that's the best way to think about Training Think Tank as a whole.
Cool.
I mean, really we're also like, we're very cerebral, but we also come at the sport from a very practical approach as well. Yeah. Like there's a lot of different aspects to the way that we approach Training Think Tank. And that's that limiter bridge performance model. That's what we try to capture too.
Yeah. So who are
all of those aspects
for people listening? Like who are some of your, games athletes that you guys have under training?
Yeah. So Max coaches Noah Olson, Travis Mayer, Will Morad. So out of last year's CrossFit Games, there was number 11, number 10, and number 2. I've coached a number of different masters, teen
And
games athletes.
Chandler Smith kind of jumps in and out with you guys too, right?
He's definitely not coached by us, but he's like, we'll call him friend of the show. Okay. He's a friend of Training Think Tank. Yeah. He comes down and trains.
He did like your
games
prep, I think, last year with you guys.
Yes, yes, he did, and he was a great addition to that.
That looked intense, man. Like I know Frankie went down and did it, and listen, like Frankie's good, and watching, when you put Frankie in a room with those guys, you're like, holy shit, like those guys.
When Frankie is in a gym, not in a competition, and taking 7th or 10th. Yeah. In an event that you're doing, you've got a really good group of people on hand.
For real. Yeah. That looks like a lot of terrible fun, maybe. But yeah. And you guys and the whole time you guys are like, you have judges for everybody, and like you're recording the times, and that seems very different than all the other games prep videos, at least I've seen.
That's part of the performance model. So limited range performance model, that's part of the performance aspect, which is your training during your competitive prep phases should mimic as closely as possible the competitive environment. That means having judges that are going to give you bullshit, no reps. That means ensuring that your fueling is handled, like how to fuel yourself for a multiple event day outside in the heat or, inside, and being prepared for a half marathon row after you just did a max deadlift. Like, making sure that your environment matches as closely as possible whatever the competition is going to look like, or else why even do a competition sim just to like get some training in? Like, what are you learning from that?
Right.
Especially at a high level, like those guys need specific exposure.
Yeah.
But then, so you were asking some of the other athletes we work with, like we also, I personally coach some younger athletes that Cedric Lapointe qualified for the CrossFit Games, but isn't going to get to go. Because he was like, I think he was 24th or 25th in the open. And he's the last person after the group that they invited. Or then Josh Miller, obviously, who was a CrossFit Games athlete last year out of French Throwdown. And then I coached 2 kids that were teen CrossFit Games athletes that have now aged up. Okay. Annalise Moore and Tig Lawless. And both of them are names that you'll hear in the next couple of years because they are rapidly on the upswing.
I hope there's some like gap that, and we talked to Justin Berg actually yesterday, and they talked a lot about how they want to have a lot more competitions, and they want to have their name on them, and it could be other organizations like Loud Live running them or whatever, but that's where I think there's a huge gap between I mentioned the 30 to 34s now have this big gap because, like we were talking, you're aging out, but the teens have like it even worse because at 18, unless you're like Haley Adams is like one of the exceptions. And I'm trying to think if there's anybody else that made that jump. Girls are a little different. But I hope that there's more for them because it's right now, sanctionals. Well, I don't even know if sanctionals exist, but there's not they're probably not going to go there and win, right?
No.
And they're certainly barely
I will say
against.
That's one of the conversations that I have with them as they're aging out of teen. I have that conversation. Like, your next step is to try, like, okay, you've been at the pinnacle of the sport for your age group, but now you're at the bottom of the totem pole and you're working your way back up. The first year of this, our goal is just simply to qualify. That's it. Like, to snake our way into a sanctional. Then you're going to go there and you're going to finish in the bottom third of the sanctional and just be ready for that. Like, but I often think if you give someone a more accurate depiction psychologically of what they're going into, that's better than telling them like, oh man, you're going to go in here, you're going to crush everybody. Like, you're such a good athlete. You know what I mean? Like,
it's like going from high school swimming to college swimming, right? I mean, you probably crushed everybody, and then you're like, oh shit, like you gotta work hard, right?
Yeah. Well, I was working hard in high school, but you get there and you're like, oh man, I'm slow. I thought I was fast. I'm slow.
Right.
But it's that transition is so challenging for those athletes. But I do think the best strategy that I've had for young athletes transitioning up is to put them on teams. Put them on teams with other athletes that are really experienced. Man, they learn so much from that experience.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's, it's one of those things where I'm excited for the changes in CrossFit. I just want to know them, and I think that was probably the biggest issue I think most people had when, you know, the sanctionals got released. Everybody was all up in the, you know, arms up in the air, like, oh, what's this look like? I personally, as a fan and athlete, I love the sanctionals.
Me too.
It gives me something to, like, I've been able to qualify for a bunch of them. Like I said, I'm never going to go to the games, but have these great experiences. Like I went to Italy, I went to Argentina last year. You know, I was supposed to go to Canada, you know, this year. Canada West got canceled. So is that something that as a coach that you like for your athletes too?
I would love for the sanctional format to continue. Here's what I really want. I really like there to be a professional circuit that's stacked on top of the sanctionals. So essentially, say you have 9 sanctionals or 12 sanctionals throughout the year. I would like those to have a pro division, and the pro division would be separate from the RX division at those. Yeah. The intention of the pro division is really to kind of weed out and figure out who should be at the CrossFit Games. Yeah. And I think that those should be paid, like podium paid spots. You know, if there's 30 athletes that qualify for the pro division or 20 athletes that qualify for the pro, then half of them are going home with a check. Yeah. Like golf, right? Like yes. Let's create a pro circuit for those guys. But then let's also keep in mind that there are young upcoming athletes, right? And they need a place to compete. They probably aren't going to be qualifying for that pro circuit, but they still need an avenue to compete. So let that be the RX division, right? Let that be number 20 through 40 or whatever, and do that throughout the season. So then you've got your grassroots growth, right? You've got your next generation who still gets to compete. Then you've got your pros who are actually making money doing what they love doing. And then guys like us get to go compete in masters divisions where we get to feel like we're
part of the
stars.
Show, right?
Yeah, we get to feel like we're stars for, like the way Wadapalooza has done it. Yeah, I mean, I've been to Wadapalooza almost every single year since 2014, and just the way that they run that show, that's exactly it. Like, I wish there were 9 of those per year versus 1.
Yeah, I think that's what Loud Labs, trying to do. I mean, they bought the Granite Games, they have West Coast Classic, Mine Classic. I mean, those are all really, really great things. I agree with you. Like, it's, I've done Granite Games a bunch, and you're like, oh man, you really feel like a professional athlete, even though I'm playing, a different field.
Yeah. You want to feel like a pro when you're out
there,
you
right? Do. I really hope those don't go away. But I do think that there needs to be also some more other separators. Like, I think there should be, the one that Rich did, the Mayhem Classic or whatever, that. At first I was like, oh, this sucks, it's only pros. But you know what? Like, there needs to be that too. And I think there also needs to be the Masters Fitness Collective Championship, which we're going to talk about, like, where it's just masters, right? And because there's a lot of moving pieces there, and the more, like, Wadapalooza's the exception. Granite Games is the exception. There's so many moving pieces that it's hard. It's amazing that they make a good experience for everybody, right? I mean, I'm sure some people don't have, but the majority of the people are like, this was badass. It's easier, and I think you're going to have, even in the midst of a pandemic, you're going to have a really good experience in Fort Wayne because we're limited, right? There's only 130 athletes. It's all masters. We have to scale up for you guys and scale down for the older divisions, but we don't have to have, the Granite Games has like 40 different variations of workouts.
I know. They have so many divisions. Wadapalooza is the same. There's so many different divisions for everything, which I think I love the inclusivity of it. But I also think, like you said, there's a place for a professional event like the Mayhem Classic, which I was there. It was a great, well-run event. It was pretty awesome. Yeah. There's a place for Masters championships, right? I've coached people at the Masters CrossFit Games, and the last 2 years are just kind of put in that little side venue. Yeah. And if having coached people there, I kind of feel like I'd rather go compete at Wadapalooza, where I get a big stage.
That's what most people have said. And it seems like, at least from what Justin Berg and their team said yesterday, that their potential thing would be the CrossFit Games are just the pros.
And as it should be, I think.
I do too. And he referred to everybody else as amateurs. And the amateurs would have their own championship that would, not probably be at the same time.
Yes. I think that's the right way to go.
I agree.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I was at, I go to the games, every year it's in Madison or whatever. And yeah, I go watch the Masters because I'm a Masters athlete. But then as soon as there's like a cool individual event, my ass is over there watching those guys, right? Like it's like going to the Super Bowl. And then they're like, hey, also like the Browns and the whoever are playing across the street. Do you want to watch that too?
No. So I equated it to this. I was actually talking to one of my friends, and I said, essentially, it's like the Masters and teens of the halftime show.
Yeah.
It's like you go to a pro basketball game, and during the halftime show, they're going to bring out the teens. You're going to watch a high school basketball game, and then you're going to watch a bunch of us that are 35 to 39 go play a basketball game. It's like, man, they used to be really good.
Yeah, right. And then they cut you off before the game's over.
It was 5 minutes in. They're like, all right, guys, good job. Good game.
Okay, well, let's shift to the Masters Fitness Collective Championship because we're going to release a workout. So you're going to be the first athlete to get to do the workout.
Well,
so
I'm going to go test this right when we're done.
It's a gnarly one. I haven't tested all of them. This is one that I've actually tested. So this is going to be, I think it's on day 3, but don't hold me to that.
Okay.
And it is 4-time, 50-calorie row.
All right.
50 single arm dumbbell push press, 70 pounds for your.
Okay.
50 wall ball shots, 30-pound ball, 10-foot target. 50 toes to bar.
Oof.
50 wall balls again. Then you got 50 dumbbell box step overs. And I think it's with 2 70s and not 1.
Oh,
and then finish with a 50-calorie row.
That is no joke. Time cap 22 minutes, right?
I think that is a time cap, actually. I think it is something like that.
That sounds like a 22-minute workout.
It is. It's bad. I think I either was like I think I was just under the time cap or just over it. I don't remember. I did it a long time ago, but so CJ Martin of Invictus, programmed all these events. And, some of them are
50
terrible.
Box step overs with a pair of 70s.
Oh,
that's purgatory at the end there, man.
It's just terrible. But yeah, so we've released that. The one we released, I think last week is, I think it's 5 rounds of 10 thrusters, or maybe it's 15 thrusters, 15 chest to bar, which would be terrible.
What was the load on that one? I didn't see that one come out.
I think it's 95. I think
95. Oh, yeah, that's still bad. That's still bad. 75 thrusters, 75 chest to bar.
It's gonna be really fast. Let me pull it up. And then the other one is assault bike, rogue echo bike, and then bar muscle ups. Yeah,
I just tested that one on Monday. It was you got to grind on that echo bike.
That one's rough, man. You know what's weird is I have both. I kind of like the echo bike. It's just so much smoother. But it feels like I'm riding a chopper just because the handlebars are high.
Yeah,
they're like. But the thing is that this is the difference. Like I'm doing the teen and masters online thing. The championship or whatever, and the workout was 30, 20, 10, overhead squats at 135, and assault bike calories. And you're allowed to do rollovers, but you couldn't jump off the bike and let it keep going. Like you could roll it over while you were so I would, the first 30, I did 30, and then I sat collecting my breath and, rolled up to 33 or whatever. You can't do that on the echo bike. As soon as you stop, it's okay, that's what you get.
It feels like pedaling through sand. Each individual pedal stroke is its own effort, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So those would be interesting. We were really trying. Assault Fitness has a new rower that came out, and they were going to let us debut it at the championship. But people have just been selling stuff off the shelves.
Oh, I know.
And you can't get anything.
I just wanted to get a dumbbell rack for my garage, and I've been able to find a dumbbell rack.
Dude, so I built a 1,200 square foot home gym, and I finished it in February. Okay, and at the time, my wife was like, "You're an idiot. We own a gym. Why would you build? All this stuff." Like, no, I'm telling you, we'll use it. Well, there's a gym that went out of business in February, and I bought all their stuff like for dirt. You know what I mean? Like, and like a nice rack, all this stuff. And one, I feel bad because if he would have went out of business a month later, he could have got double his money. And two, the pandemic hits, and my wife is like, "You're the smartest person in the world. Like, you're like Noah when he built the ark. Because we had places to work out, and we'd go down there for date night. Because it's about 200 yards off my house, so like you actually have to like. And I did it on purpose because I had it in my garage. Man, sometimes I go in my garage and like half-ass it. But if I intently go to the gym, like I go there for a reason. And so I walk down 200 yards and, get my work done or whatever. But yeah, it's been great. Hopefully when you come into Fort Wayne, I'll get to show you around. What stinks is the first day, I think I was telling you this via email or text or whatever. The first day originally was going to be at my house. So I live on like 3.5 acres, but we're on a 22-acre lake. So like, it's awesome. And I like, and the first event was going to be a swim, like an open water, which you would have loved, like 600 meters.
500-meter open water swim or something. Yeah.
It was like 600 or 700 meters for you guys.
Oh, no joke then. Yeah.
And you go in, it's awesome. Like I have a beach and my neighbor has a beach. You'd enter in from my neighbor's beach, and we have an island. So you had to swim all the way around this island and back. And then when you got on the beach, you had to pick up a 130-pound sandbag and run it like, I don't know, like 600 meters or something, like up a hill. And I thought it would have been a really cool event. And then event 2 was max snatch. And then you had a trail run, but it's time trial style. And so I don't know if you like the first event now is swim in the pool. And I don't know if we've released this or not, but it's because we still have to test it. This might change, but it's 30 hang kettlebell swings with 53 pounds, 100-meter swim, 3 rounds.
Woo! That'll burn up the shoulders a bit.
Dude, it's like I tested one round of it in my lake, and I like text CJ. I was like, dude, this might be too much because because then you got to get out of the pool and you got to dry your hand off and start doing the swings again. But so that's going to be at Orchard Ridge. It's a country club, and then the second event is at a minor league baseball stadium, which is right downtown. And you have 4 minutes to snatch, and you can start with a loaded barbell, and then you run a mile time trial. So you're not running with anybody else. So
I have a question on the mile time trial. So since we're at a minor league stadium, are we running some stadium stairs, or is that just a flat mile time trial?
It's really cool. So the way the stadium was made is the concourse on purpose. They made it so people could run on it. And so it's exactly a third of a mile. So
that's cool.
So you'll run 3 laps. What's really cool about it is that, so let's say you're the first athlete up, you start, you have 4 minutes. When you finish, you will run. The second athlete at the 1 minute mark starts snatching. So every minute there'll be someone going off on the time trial, and you won't know what the other person gets. So that's totally on CJ. I thought that was like a super cool idea. We're going to hide that, like no one's going to know anybody's times. So you can't go out and game it. Cause one of his biggest things was, it's like, you never really get to find out how fast somebody is because all you do is just try to beat the person.
Yeah. You just race.
Yeah. So I think it's really cool. I'm excited because it's literally just going to be like rapid fire the whole time. That's going to be cool. And I think the first day in a good long competition should be to really test the athletes, but not crush them.
Yeah, I totally agree.
That's the rest. And then I think another thing that we're doing, we talked a lot about this, but when you arrive for check-in, like you'll be tested for COVID. Like I've got my clinical team's going to be there. We're going to test all the athletes. And then we have enough test kits if we need to test people every day, but I think we're going to probably just say if there's anybody questionable, we'll like retest or whatever. But we're going to make sure that at worst case, we're going to be able to test everybody prior to them leaving in case anybody was like, concerned about having to like self-quarantine or whatever. So
I got you too. Yeah. No, I think I love that idea.
Yeah. Super cool. So we're really excited about it. It's been, all of the sponsors that have stepped up are going to make this like a really, really cool event. And, we kind of joked on one of the podcasts saying like, whoever wins, they're going to need a truck to drive all the stuff back because like Crossover Symmetry has stepped up. Normatech and Hyperice are given podium finisher stuff. Noble, we're still working with Whoop on some stuff. We had this really, really cool thing going. They've just got so busy with the PGA Tour and some of the professional events. But are you a Whooper?
I'm not a Whooper. I've got my Garmin, which has barely been functioning since the attack they had. They had some ransomware attack, so none of the software is working. Great.
That sucks. Well, so Whoop, we were in talks with every athlete would get a Whoop, every athlete would wear a Whoop. And then, we would track the data through the weekend, and really look at like, it'd be really cool to like see how you performed on Thursday. We get to look at your sleep, and then like we talk about that on Friday, and then we can compare it relatively how you would compete. But, we'd have to get everybody that doesn't have a Whoop, early enough. And then the other thing would be the respiratory rate, right? Because like, I don't know if you follow that at all or not, but they're able to track early onsets of COVID 2 or 3 days prior to having symptoms through your respiratory rate. And
interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So that's what the PGA Tour everyone on tour has a Whoop. They were able to guess that a guy had COVID 3 days before he had symptoms. So they went and got tested and guess what? He had COVID. So now they're blowing up because that's a really good thing for sports to have, to kind of get back to normal. And we want that. And we will have that at some point. It probably just won't be this competition. So,
yeah,
but
that would be awesome. I'd love to have a Whoop on my wrist right now.
I know, right? It's cool. So it's still in the works. So hopefully it'll happen. But, Kyle, I want to thank you for your time. This is really awesome. Getting to know a little bit more about you and Training Think Tank and talking about the competition a little bit. I think we probably need to have you back on because when you start talking about some of your coaching philosophies, like really hits home. I've been an athlete my whole life, and when you talk about, you hit a couple points that hit home for me, like the mental side, the physical side, and then having like an individualized plan. I don't think I can stress. I try to tell younger people, it's like you have to have a plan. You mentioned before, you said you're doing like 30% the right thing and 70% where you just like kind of beat yourself up. And people are still doing that. And they don't realize.
I think the majority of people are doing that.
Yeah. They don't. So, and if anybody, if anybody's interested in Training Think Tank, just go to the website. Is that how you guys?
Yeah. So trainingthinktank.com. You can also, my Instagram, you can follow, it's Kyle Ruth _TTT. You can follow Training Think Tank Instagram. It's just Training Think Tank. And Chris, our social media guy, does an incredible job. He's a photographer and videographer by trade who just happens to be our media guy.
Yeah. Cool.
So we've got great stuff on there as well.
Very cool. Well, hey, we're excited to host you in the fort for sure. And excited to talk to you again. We may have to have you hop on the mic when you get to Fort Wayne and get some of your thoughts on when you're in the middle of competition.
I'm down. I think it sounds like a great plan.
Cool. Thanks, Kyle.
All right, man. I appreciate it.
Hey, have a good one.